Vexing as the question of King Jaehaerys' marriage to his sister, Alysanne, was to Queen Alyssa and Lord Rogar, it should not be imagined that this was the sole concern occupying them during the regency. As with every king that's ever existed, they had one major concern: coin, or more precisely, the scarcity of it. The issue stood as the crown's most urgent issue. The wars of King Maegor against Aegon the Uncrowned and the Faith Militant had proved ruinously costly, leaving the royal treasury all but drained. Wars are expensive, too at the same time twice as much. In an effort to replenish the coffers, Maegor's Master of Coin had increased the taxes already in place and introduced harsh new levies as well, yet these efforts yielded far less gold than had been hoped, and served mainly to deepen the resentment with which lords of the realm already regarded the king. Nor did matters grow better with the coming of Jaehaerys to the throne. The young king's coronation and his mother's golden wedding had both been magnificent celebrations that did much to secure them the affection of the lords and smallfolk alike, but such splendour carried its own price. A still greater expense lay on the horizon, for Lord Rogar was resolved that work on the Dragonpit must be finished before he surrendered the city and governance of the realm to Jaehaerys. Yet the coin required to see the project through remained sorely wanting. Critics of the hand often state that the sheer cost of his own wedding to Alyssa could have funded a significant portion of the construction, for a short while at least. Edwell Celtigar, Lord of Claw Isle, had served as an ineffectual hand to Maegor the Cruel. Granted another opportunity during the regency, he proved no more capable in the office of Master of Coin. Reluctant to give offence to his fellow lords, Celtigar chose to instead lay new taxes upon the smallfolk of King's Landing, who were conveniently at hand. Port fees were increased threefold. Certain goods were to be taxed both upon entering the city and again when they departed, and fresh taxes were demanded of innkeeps and builders alike. None of these measures achieved the desired results of replenishing the crown's empty vaults. Instead, building slowed to a standstill. The inns grew quiet and trade diminished sharply as merchants redirected their ships away from King's Landing to Driftmark, Duskendale, Maidenpool, and other ports where the burden of taxation might be avoided. Lannisport and Old Town, the other great cities of the realm, had also been named in Lord Celtigar's new taxes, but their decrees proved far less effective, largely because Casterly Rock and the Hightower ignored them and made little effort to enforce the collection. New levies did succeed in one respect, however, for they made Lord Celtigar widely despised throughout King's Landing. Lord Rogar and Queen Alyssa received a portion of that ire as well. Dragonpit proved another casualty of the policy. The crown no longer possessed the coin to pay its builders, and work upon the Great Dome came to a halt. Coin, while the most pressing concern, was not the only issues the regents faced. Storms were gathering in both the north and the south as well. With Lord Rogar detained in King's Landing, the Dornishmen had grown increasingly bold, striking more often across the Dornish marches and even troubling the Stormlands proper. Rumours spread of yet another Vulture King rising in the Red Mountains. Lord Rogar's brothers, Boris and Garin, insisted they lacked the men and coin required to hunt him down and root him out. Given Lord Rogar was the Lord of Storm's End, and House Baratheon's history with the Dornish, this issue personally troubled the hand deeply. For the time being, he had put aside his own wrath and focused on rebuilding the realm as a whole. While the situation was dire in the south, more alarming still was the situation in the north. Brandon Stark, Lord of Winterfell, had died in 49 AC, not long after returning from the Golden Wedding. The Northmen said the long journey had demanded too much of him. His son, Walton, succeeded him, and when a sudden rebellion erupted in 50 AC among the men at the Night's Watch at Rhymegate and Sable Hall, the new Lord of Winterfell gathered his strength and rode for the wall to aid the loyal watchmen in suppressing supporting the uprising. The rebels were former poorfellows and warriors' sons who had accepted the clemency offered by Jaehaerys, led by Oliver Bracken and Sir Raymond Mallory, the two turncloak knights who had once served in Maegor the Cruel's Kingsguard before forsaking him for Jaehaerys. The Lord Commander of the Watch, unwisely, had entered Bracken and Mallory with command of two decaying forts and charged them with their restoration. Instead, the two men resolved to claim these castles as their own seat, to set themselves up as lords. In truth, a foolish and doomed endeavour from the start. Their uprising proved brief. For every man of the Night's Watch who joined their cause, 10 remained faithful to their vows. Once Walton Stark and his bannermen arrived to lend their strength to the Black Brothers, they moved swiftly to retake Rhymegate. The Oathbreakers were seized and hanged, all save for Sir Oliver Bracken himself, whom Lord Walton executed with the famed Valyrian steel blade of House Stark, Ice. When word of Rhymegate's fall reached Sable Hall, the rebels stationed there abandoned the castle and fled beyond the wall, hoping to find allies among the free folk. Lord Walton gave chase, but 2 days north, amidst the snows of the haunted forest, he and his men were set upon by giants. Later accounts record that Walton Stark slew 2 of the monsters before he was dragged from his saddle and torn to pieces. What remained of him was gathered by his surviving men and brought back to Castle Black in fragments. As for Sir Raymond Mallory and the other deserters, the welcome they received from the wildlings was a cold one. Rebel or not, the free folk had no fondness for crows. Sir Raymond's head was delivered to Eastwatch by the Sea half a year later. When asked what had become of the rest of his companions, the wildling chieftain only laughed and replied, "We ate them." Brandon Stark's second son, Alaric, therefore became the Lord of Winterfell. He would rule the north for 23 years, a capable lord, though a stern one. And for a long time, however, he had little good to say of King Jaehaerys, for he laid the blame for his brother Walton's death upon the king's clemency, and was often heard to remark that his grace would have done better to take the head of Maegor's men, rather than sending them to the wall. Perhaps there is some truth in Lord Alaric's words. Far removed from the disturbances in the north, King Jaehaerys and Queen Alysanne remained in their self-imposed exile from court. Yet they were far from idle. Each morning Jaehaerys persisted in his rigorous regime of training with his knights of the King's Guard, and was improving remarkably each day. His evenings, meanwhile, were devoted to careful study of accounts, detailing the reign of his grandfather, Aegon the Conqueror, whose rule he hoped to emulate in his own when the regency came to an end. The 3 maesters of Dragonstone aided him greatly in these pursuits, as did the Queen herself, who was an avid reader, and some say even more well-read and knowledgeable of history and politics than the king himself. Something that would become very clear in the years to come. In fact, the maesters of Dragonstone were just as impressed with the young queen as they were with the king. As the days went by, an ever-growing number of visitors began making their way to Dragonstone to confer with the young king. Lord Massey of Stonedance was the first to arrive, but Lord Staunton of Rook's Rest, Lord Darklyn of Duskendale, and Lord Bar Emmon of Sharp Point followed soon after. Lords Hart, Rollingford, Mooton and Stokeworth were not long behind them. The young Lord Rosby appeared as well, his father having taken his own life upon the fall of King Maegor, and humbly begged the king's forgiveness, which Jaehaerys was pleased to grant him. It must be pointed out that many of these lords' seats were on Blackwater Bay or within the Crown lands, but lords from further afield did travel to meet with the bright young king. Though Lord Daemon Velaryon, the Crown's Lord Admiral and Master of Ships, remained in King's Landing with the regents, that did not prevent Jaehaerys and Alysanne from flying their dragons to Driftmark to inspect his shipyards, accompanied by his sons, their cousins, Corwin, Jorgen and Victor. When word of these gatherings reached Lord Rogar in King's Landing, he was greatly angered and went as far as to ask Lord Daemon whether the Velaryon fleet might be used to prevent Lords Lickspittles from creeping off the Dragonstone to curry favour with the boy king. Lord Velaryon's reply was characteristically blunt. "No," he said. "The hand regarded this as yet another mark of disrespect. However, the games of politics and subterfuge that Rogar Baratheon and Queen Alyssa Velaryon had begun were about to expose themselves on Dragonstone, with the impact forever changing the relationship between Queen Alyssa, Rogar Baratheon, and the King and Queen forever.